5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is Deducter bringing you the Pro League playoffs. Today we have KT versus STX. This is going to be an exciting series, and to open up, KT bringing out Stats as the brown Protoss at the 6 o'clock position, whereas Bogus is going to be who STX sent out as the red Terran at the 12 o'clock position. So this is Icarus. They are in cross-match position, and I am very excited about this series. The playoffs, you know, there won't be, teams will not be holding back. They will send out their star players with well-practiced strategies usually, which makes for very exciting games. And often these series will go to an ace match, which is even better. And so there's a lot of excitement here afoot. Flash will, I think, despite his injury, will almost certainly be playing in this series. I actually have not looked at the roster beforehand, but this is very important. KT actually has to win this before taking an advance, so you know they have to bring out Flash, I feel. Let's see though how KT does. Usually they'll reserve Flash towards the end, perhaps. Let's see what strategies both teams will choose to employ. There's a lot of choice depending on what players they want to send out here, and that guy likes NBC Game. I think NBC Game is something that we should all support because they are one of the broadcasters of StarCraft in Korea. Gateway going down here for Stats. Supply Depot going down, and Barracks going to go down soon for Bogus. Bogus is going to wall himself in, it looks like. And, you know, the thing about these playoffs, the high-stakes matches, even the smaller actions become epic and become exciting. If this just was an ordinary Pro League game, sometimes you look at this, oh, this guy's just building a Supply Depot, and a refinery going down here for Bogus. So, wow, this is pretty standard. Let's see whether Bogus opts to go for the factory first, or he'll put down his expansion inside his base before he puts down his factory, which is the fact that he put down the refinery now. Probably going to get the factory first. And those guys seem nonplussed by appearing on television. Good for them. Just eating their snacks there. Simulator and core. Simulator finish for Stats, core going up here. So now, only now though, is Bogus choosing to scout. He's completely blocked himself in. Stats also not choosing to scout at all thus far. Not sure whether I agree with that. I think that is a rather silly decision. Factory going down here for Bogus as expected. So, I don't know what Stats is doing. If Bogus were doing something tricky, I mean, even if Stats does not manage to get inside Bogus' space, it may be wise to keep your SCV around just to see whether the Terran player puts down their command center. Although that's not necessarily indicative of the Terran not expanding, because the Terran can always put down the command center inside the walling base and float it over. But more often than not, you will glean sufficient information to make the scouting worthwhile, in my opinion, over the tiny amount of economic advantage you would gain, unless Stats has something very specific in mind that he's planned for this particular build. Or this particular game, I should say. By the way, Bogus, again, not one of the most famous players, but actually pretty good these days. His best matchup, he's actually 55%, over 55% in all his matchups. His, wow, it's hard to tell because both his versus Terran and versus Protoss games are, I mean, versus Zerg and versus Protoss games are very strong. They are both at 58%, so Bogus certainly a force to be reckoned with, and he will be a worthy opponent here for Stats. And on the other hand, Stats, certainly a capable player, but these days not quite performing at the same level, I feel, as last year's Stats, putting down his Nexus now. So here's hoping that he practiced hard for these Pro League playoff games here. On this map, Icarus is slightly Terran favored. PVT is at 47%, but again, there's no real map advantage for either player, I feel. So engineering bay being put in a sort of corner position, probably just going to use that as a floating scout to try to detect any incoming shuttles, and of course to get the turret or two out. Always a good move here. And Stats, only now is he really angling to check out what's going on. Hopefully he has a Robo Bay building, needs some observers to take a look at what's going on. Stats is keeping a probe in the middle of the map, just while it appears he has a probe here outside the natural expansion of Bogus, and he has some sort of unit in the middle. It might be a Dragoon, actually, but Stats is being somewhat more proactive now. Stats may, in fact, be going for some sort of Reaver strategy, perhaps. High risk, high reward strategy in the finals, which I think is the way to go, the tank taking out the scouting probe. I think the probe saw the command center, which wouldn't come as a shock to Stats at all, so none of this is unexpected. This is a fairly standard, safe opening. Actually, the safest opening for Bogus. He does not want to be... And then just as I was saying, high risk, high reward. Stats going for the high risk maneuver. I like that. Good for him. In the finals, that's when you start throwing the dice. Usually people who play safe do not tend to do too well. Witness Fantasy 2 seasons ago, I believe. Defeating Jaedong, not through late game, long, grueling 30-minute matches, but with bunker rushes. Well, bunker rush in the second game. I actually forgot how you won the first one, but I'm pretty sure it was a rush. So, anyway, high risk, high reward situations, certainly worth it. That is not to say that we shouldn't have perhaps one of the longer, epic matches. That's always nice to watch. But at this point, the teams, what matters is winning, and you know, they don't care how exactly they win. Bogus, with his scout coming to take a peek at the natural, he doesn't really see anything. The scout not getting into the main. Stats almost letting the scout through, but just killing it at the last moment, it seems. Starport going down here for Bogus. Bogus is also putting down his second factory. He's got tanks in his main. He seems prepared for some sort of drop. He is very cautious thus far. Actually, this will be a reasonably good response to what Stats is doing. Bogus with 3 tanks in his base, that is going to be able to stop any sort of Reaver harass, I feel, as long as he doesn't screw it up horribly. Sometimes players are a bit, the pressures of the finals can be a bit too much for some of these players, and they do not seem to show the same focus they might usually do. The Reaver in the Shadow is coming out. It's going to see the first tank. Stats, however, having invested his resources into this, has no choice but to go for the attack. Interesting to note, Stats has dropped both of his Zealots, and his Reaver not quite getting a full hit on the tank. Again, the tank managing to dodge back, and now both Zealots are down. The screening units are gone for Stats, and Stats only managing to take out a tank. Looks like at the cost of 2 Zealots. He wants to achieve economic damage, obviously, but unable to do so for now. And Bogus is going to set up turrets to be able to ward away this shuttle. This doesn't mean this drop has been useless, I feel. On the one hand, Stats has a free reign to put up his expansion at the 7 o'clock position. A few vultures coming out here from Bogus. Bogus, I think he wants to take a peek at the natural if possible, or maybe split off some of the vultures to check at the other expansions. Looks like Bogus has predicted an expansion going down at the 7 o'clock. Does Stats have a cannon up? Stats does not have a cannon up. These vultures are going to take out this probe, stopping any attempt to put down the cannon. But Bogus, with only 3 vultures, unable to break through that blockade for now. The Stats could always move some units back to defend if necessary. Both players, mostly on the defensive here. Stats trying early offense, but not quite pulling it off. Well, mostly because Bogus kept all his units inside his base, it looks like. Stats has the Observer to see all of this. Hopefully the Observer sees the dropship. That's what Stats needs to know about. Because if the dropship loads up a few units and go to the 7 o'clock, this could spell disaster for Stats. He's basically going to lose all his mining over there, and he'll have no way of Oh, that's not true. He has the shuttle, the 2 Reavers, but the shuttle is quite slow. I don't think Stats sees this, and Bogus, taking his time loading his units, seems to be either a misclick, or perhaps he wanted to decide, I should load up a tank instead of 4 vultures. Perhaps that's what he's thinking. Unless he actually has 2 tanks in there. I don't know. Speed shuttle out here for Stats. Looks like drop and counter drop coming from both players. Well, not counter drop, counter attack. This isn't even counter attack because neither player actually knows the other is going. So drops by both players concurrently. There we go. Bogus has his dropship coming at 7 o'clock. Stats has nothing to defend. Tank and 2 vultures going to force these probes to move back. At the same time, while the probes will mostly manage to escape due to the blockade, that's at least something for Stats. Stats needs to counter drop and do his damage. He has 2 shuttles out. Although he has opted not to use both shuttles on the offense here, I think he pulled back his shuttle to defend. Not sure whether that was wise. These 2 Reavers could have caused a lot of damage. Stats is going to fend Bogus back for now, and he's sort of tipped his hand a bit. Bogus knows there are 2 Reavers and 2 shuttles out, so Bogus will surely be extra cautious now in his defense. Perhaps that is what Stats intended, to keep Bogus sort of confining his base. Bogus, though, has built a Wraith as a response. Excellent maneuver by Bogus, I have to say. His dropship, in fact, I believe, escaped the Dragoons that were trying to trap it. And now Stats is using a Dragoon to break down his own blockade. This is what I mean. Terran players often take advantage of the Protoss walling, using it against them. Protoss really should put down 1 or 2 cannons. The costing savings is, in terms of their units, is in terms of the mining time they could potentially lost, is far more worth it. And now another drop coming in by Bogus, and Stats has no response. Stats, with his mouth open, breathing hard, Stats is forced to kill his own pylons coming yet again, and I do not know what Stats has been doing with his 2 shadows this entire time. Unfortunately, the mini-map not exactly kind to the color brown, so I don't know where Stats' shadow are. That dropship getting taken down, but it did the damage it wanted to, and that girl seemed very excited to be on television, I think. Bogus has trapped a few units of Stats here at the 1 o'clock position. He's also got the Wraith out to deal with the shadows. Drop all over these tanks. That's actually a pretty nice maneuver. Hopefully Stats can take out the Wraith with his Dragoons. He is not focus firing on the Wraith. Stats showing a fairly good micro here. In fact, with his units, he's managed to clear out what forces Bogus has. Bogus sending additional tanks to try to do this, and Stats may very well load up his Reavers. Stats not paying attention to his Reavers, getting fired upon by siege tanks. I think he picked up the Reaver at the last possible second. The Wraith is going to come in, though, to deal with this. Wraith being very cautious here because the Dragoon almost taking down the Wraith. The Dragoon going down, and the Wraith with 1 hit left on it is going to chase down these 2 shadows. Disaster for Stats. He delayed the expansion for a bit, but now Stats showing some good micro there, losing a shadow while picking up the Reaver immediately with the other shadow and bringing 2 Dragoons to reinforce. Both players playing at a pretty high level, I have to say. But again, Stats, I'm not quite convinced that his decisions this game have been the best. He really should have gone on the counteroffensive during all this time. And the drops were taking place in his bases. Perhaps he was too distracted, and Bogus really, perhaps by luck, perhaps by skill, call it what you will, he did get the dropping first, and that probably distracted Stats enough that Stats did not unleash his own counter drop. Did not unleash his own drop at the correct time that he wanted to. Instead, Stats seems to be waffling a bit now. Stats putting down the cannons. He's also getting another base there at the 5 o'clock. Both players seem content to macro up for now. And Bogus has secured himself 3 bases. He is in good position. He's getting 2 more factories. Armories are upgrading furiously, spinning very quickly there. And this observer going to spot that Bogus is setting up a sort of a blockade near his, trying to defend his natural expansion and the expansion he put up at the 1 o'clock position, which is certainly very wise. If the Protoss player Stats is unwise here and assaults into the teeth of the Terran defenses, that could be a game-losing maneuver for him. Bogus has a lot of units out. He's got plenty of tanks and vultures. 2 shuttles still out here for Stats. I think this is a good maneuver using his shuttles. Speed shuttles at that. He could potentially do a lot of damage either with a combination of Zealot drops or with High Templar inside the shuttle when the big battle comes. So now Stats being more cautious with his forces, losing only a solitary probe there to the vultures. There are a lot of Zealots, it seems. Yep, those 2 shuttles seem prepared for Zealot drops. The Arbiter coming out here for Stats. So both players playing at a pretty high level. Stats does not seem to have enough forces, it looks like, on the ground, not compared with Bogus. Bogus easily has more than a dozen tanks just outside of his natural, and he's probably got more tanks as backup defending his bases. That Wraith's still alive. I guess Stats wanted to chase it down. These vultures might be able to catch a few of the Dragoons if Stats isolated here, picking off 1 of the Dragoons, but the remainder of the Dragoons sort of trapped a bit on top of that cliff there. So Stats, I think, needs to be a bit cautious. He is furiously macroing, I'm sure, to get the units he needs to break the push that will be incoming from Bogus soon enough. Stats clearing out the mines in the middle of the map. EMP is being researched, it looks like, and this game may also come down to EMP versus stasis. Usually the Protoss will be able to get the stasis off without issue. In fact, that's one thing I always wonder why Terran players don't actually go for Ghost. I know it's very expensive tech tree. You have to research probably, well, at the minimum lockdown, but probably Cloak. However, I think that might be the better counter to Arbiter, since Ghost, very small, and when cloaked, usually Protoss players do not think about them. You stasis, you lock down the shuttles or the Arbiters. There is no counter that the Protoss can employ against lockdown. They literally have nothing to deal with it, and the lockdown never misses. Whereas EMP, great maneuver, of course, knocking down all the shields, but you can dodge it with your Arbiters. And High Templar, as long as they're inside the shuttle, can avoid EMP effects. Whereas Lockdown, on the other hand, will cripple both strategies. I guess it must just be the resource investments and the amount of APM required to employ Ghosts effectively. Now, Bogus looks like he is moving out with all his forces. Stats sees this. He is forced to pull back, at least temporarily. Bogus has an absolutely massive army. Stats can catch Bogus out of position a bit. He might yet be in good position. Stats would be wise not to fight here, though, because Bogus' tanks are protected at the southern flank by that map artifact in the middle, while that empty space, call it what you will, well, it's literally space, because this is a space platform map. But regardless, Bogus' southern flank is protected. It would be foolish for Stats to assault now. Stats should fall back a bit, in my opinion, but Bogus, being quite clever, he's got marauding vultures around the map. He's laying mines to try to cut off Stats' army, and if those vultures can see the High Templar, this will be absolute disaster for Stats. Stats' army, it looks like, caught on the retreat here, being forced back. He's managed to pick off the science vessel. That's going to be critical. But Stats just does not have enough units, it seems. His units getting caught in his retreat, absolutely slaughtered here. The mines being pulled in the units, absolute disaster for Stats. Bogus now with the clear momentum advantage. Stats, oh, that's what he did in the meantime. He recalled part of his army into the main, but Bogus looks like he's going to be able to clear this up comfortably, whereas Stats has nothing to deal with the massive Terran mech army, unstoppable force here, barreling down on his natural. There are probably enough vultures there just to get the job done. Stats has one remaining card he can play. His shuttles with Zealot bombs, but the shuttle going down with the Goliaths. He also has the Templar. I don't know whether those Templars survive or not. 3 storms would be able to save him right now. Stats can't afford to lose his natural, at least temporarily, but it doesn't look like Stats is going to win this game. There are too many tanks siege up outside of his base, and Bogus looks like he's ready to make the push up the ramp, and Stats has nothing to stop this. Stats just getting caught in a bad position, getting his forces trapped, and then on the retreat. It's not like he had much of a choice. He couldn't attack. That would have been disaster. He probably should have retreated earlier before he got his forces surrounded. As it stands, it looks like STX is going to take first blood. Bogus with all his units, it looks like, parked outside, and Bogus putting a floating command center down here at the 3 o'clock position. Just embarrassing Stats at this point. Bogus doesn't even need to bother to siege up. Stats is fighting as hard as he's managed to stasis vital group of units. Bogus not being completely silly, and Stats somehow managing to hold this off by miracle, it seems. That Stats has surpassed my expectation. He kept enough units in his base to counterattack just when Bogus marched up the ramp. Bogus has cleverly left a few tanks beneath the ramp, which has continued to do significant damage, but Bogus just has too many units. He's sending troops to clean out the base at the 3 o'clock, it looks like, despite the fact that Stats has put down numerous gateways there. Bogus also has a second column of mechanical forces marching to Stats' natural, and he's just going to contain Stats. If worse comes to worse, that's what he can do. Stats is fighting furiously, better than I thought he would, considering the dire straits he was in. I still think Bogus is almost certainly going to win this game. The Stats does have 2 mining bases which are untouched. And Bogus surely has to be running a bit out of resources. Not UCMB there by Bogus. He's got 2 science vessels and Stats. His remaining Dragoons in his base not able to do anything. Stats looks like he's trying to save his bases, not his main, but he can't afford to lose his main. He'll lose all his tech. So Stats, despite a great defense at the last moment, is not going to be able to save himself. It looks like Arbiter getting EMP'd again. He cannot afford that either. Shuttle withdrawing, abandoning the burning base there at the 3 o'clock. I don't know what is in that shuttle. Possibly some probes, or maybe the odd Templar or Zealot that escaped the destruction. But the action has reached. Well, it had reached its climax earlier. I would argue that the turning point in this game was when Bogus annihilated Stats' army in the field, with Stats putting up almost no resistance, just getting caught in a very bad location and pinned, such that as it withdrew, took insane amounts of damage. In fact, all of it was destroyed in retreat there. Great maneuver by Bogus, I have to say. good positioning of his units. Stats fighting as hard as he can on what bases he has left. But as you can see, Bogus not taking any chances. He's actually got another command center floated to 3 o'clock, and I think he has a command center at the 11 o'clock. He's got 2 more mining bases. He's going to be secure economically. And GG coming from Stats. Well fought game by Bogus, I have to say. STX drawing first blood here, going on to set 2.
그리고 일본인 시즌 정규리그에서 32승 비약적인 발전이 비약적인 승률로 드러나면서 1세트를 STX가 잡았네요.
이 선수는 승부사입니다. 상대가 옥점탄에 올리는 것 확인한 이후에 레이스로 안 보여줘 드랍슛에 7점 패. 상대를 완벽하게 놀랐어요.
정말 대방수가 준비를 정말 잘 해왔습니다. 미리 진짜 안정적으로 턴스 빨리 건설하면서 레이스 안 뽑고 터렛이 있으니까 터렛에 대한 그리고 시드볼에 대한 수비를 확실하게 해주고 그냥 드라시도 한 달 빨리 생산해서 7시에 먼저 급습을 하는 게 이게 정말 카운터로 진짜 김대호 선수가 들어가려고 해도 멀티태스킹에서 이시영 선수가 앞서가다 보니까 김대호 선수가 그 자원 대비 많은 진리도 거두지 못했습니다. 네, 이시영 선수의 완벽한 판단과 완벽한 컨트롤로 지금 김대호 선수를 압도를 했네요. 하포트 지어놓고 레이스를 안 뽑고 드랍십을 바로 생산했던 거 그러니까 역분으로 생산을 했었던 것이 김대엽 선수의 생각을 좀 넘어선 판단이었기 때문에 트리플이 넥서스를 지어졌는데 프로브를 한 2차례 3차례 뺐어야 되는 상황이 되는 거거든요. 그 와중에 자신은 트리플 커맨드 센터를 먹는데 시간이 별로 안 걸렸기 때문에 중반 이후에 힘은 이시영이 강했습니다.
네, 이시영 선수 0910 시즌의 3승 그리고 이번 시즌 오늘 경기를 포함해 33승 이 10배 성장 대박의 꿈을 이루네요.
네, 그 대박의 꿈이 과연 이 중요한 무대에서도 이 큰 무대에서도 실현이 될 수 있을까 많은 걱정과 우려 뭐 이런 것들이 있지 않았겠습니까? 근데 이시영 선수 그걸 확실하게 해주고